Hello, and thanks very much for joining me. I want to take a few minutes to talk about some of the craziness that's going on here in Washington, but I also want to invite all of you to submit your comments to us. What I don't want to see is an inside the Beltway mentality develop here. We need to hear from people all over this country on the issue of the government shutdown, on the budget, and on ideas that are important to you. So please do not hesitate. Please get in touch with us. As everybody knows, Republicans control the White House, they control the U.S. Senate, and they control the U.S. House. And if they want a government shutdown, that is going to be on their hands. They are the ones who have the power. I hope very much that is not the case, because a government shutdown would hurt millions of Americans who need government services. It would hurt many government employees who depend upon their paychecks to take care of their families. And it would also hurt the armed forces. So I hope very much the Republicans get their act together and do not force a government shutdown. Now, there are three fundamental issues that we are addressing right now. Number one is the issue of parity. I know that's not a sexy term, but it's very important. What does that mean? It means that since 2011, every budget agreement has required an equal amount of spending for the defense and non-defense needs of our country, i.e. the needs of the working families of America. Spend $1 more on defense, you spend $1 more on the needs of working families. Unfortunately, Mitch McConnell, the Republican leader here in the Senate, is trying now to end that parity. There are some Republicans who over a 2-year period want to spend an additional $180 billion on the military. $180 billion increase in military spending. To my mind, that's a little bit crazy, given the fact that we now spend more than the next 12 nations on earth combined on military spending, but that's what they want. But here is the point. For every dollar that is spent on defense, there must be $1 spent on the needs of a middle class in this country, which is shrinking. And let me give you an example of what I mean by that. Right now, we have a children's health insurance program, which is not being adequately funded. The Republicans have not reauthorized this CHIP program, despite the fact that it is now 3.5 months into the new fiscal year. 9 million children will lose their health insurance if Republicans don't get their act together. They must. Second of all, we have community health centers all over this country. Community health centers provide insurance, provide health care to 27 million Americans. 27 million people get their primary health care through community health centers. They have not been reauthorized, despite the fact that we're into 3.5 months of a new fiscal year. Community health centers provide not only primary health care, they provide dental care, mental health counseling, so very important in the opioid crisis, low-cost prescription drugs. That is something that must be funded. Furthermore, all over this country, we have a pension crisis. Workers are reaching the age of retirement. They've got nothing. Right now, we're in a position where 1.5 million workers who were promised their pensions will lose some or all of those pensions. Multi-employer pension program, if we do not act now, we have got to deal with the pension crisis. And in my view, we've got to go beyond that and make sure that every worker in this country has a decent pension plan. We have to address the issue of pensions. Washington Post reported a couple of months ago something that was really quite unbelievable. Last year, some 10,000 people with disabilities died while their disability claims were being processed by the Social Security Administration. 10,000 people died while their claims were being processed. Right now, the Social Security Administration is significantly underfunded, understaffed in terms of meeting the needs of people with disabilities, meeting the needs of elderly people in this country. We need a strong Social Security administration. They have to be adequately funded. Republicans have got to work with us to make sure that happens. Right now, there are 30,000 vacancies in the Veterans Administration, which means that our veterans are not getting the quality or timely care that they are entitled to. We got to start filling those vacancies. That has got to be part of this budget agreement. One of the crises in this country that we don't talk about enough, but I hear about it in Vermont all of the time, is this student debt situation. We got 40 million people in this country who are dealing with student debt. Many of these people are paying off month after month their student debt. You know what? They're getting more in debt because the interest rates are accumulating and are resulting in their falling further and further in debt. We need to begin addressing the student debt crisis in America. Going to school, getting the education that you need in order to get the decent jobs that are out there, in order to strengthen our economy, should not be a crime, should not result in people having serious financial problems decade after decade after decade. I know that in Vermont, and I know all over this country, virtually all over this country, working families are finding it very, very hard to get the quality, affordable child care that they need. Cannot continue to ignore that issue. Investing in pre-K education is one of the best investments that we can make in terms of a return on that investment. Kids who have decent child care, do well in school, have a better chance to go to post-high school, get decent jobs, become taxpayers. This is an investment we must make. Furthermore, I come from a rural state, and I can tell you that in Vermont and all over rural America, our infrastructure is collapsing, not only in rural America, obviously, but all over this country. We need to start investing in roads, in bridges, in clean water, in wastewater. We need to make sure that rural America has the infrastructure, has the broadband. How do you bring businesses into your community if you don't have high quality, affordable broadband, if you don't have decent cell phone service? And the answer is you don't. So we've got to start paying attention to the needs of rural America. And there's another issue out there that I think is just impacting virtually every state in this country, and that is the terrible, terrible opioid and mental health epidemic. We have got to provide the treatment that people need. We got to provide the prevention efforts to keep our young people from falling victim to opioid or heroin. This is an enormously important issue. So these are some of the issues that have got to be addressed. And if the Republicans want to spend significantly more for military spending, well, you know what? They're going to have to start standing up for the working families of this country. We cannot simply be a nation and a government which tries to throw tens of millions of people off of health insurance, a nation which gives huge tax breaks to billionaires, a nation, a government which does not even recognize the reality of climate change, a government which is just trying to destroy net neutrality. And we've got to be a government every once in a while that remembers that the vast majority of these people are working people, are people in the middle class, are people who have serious problems. And those problems have got to be addressed. So that's the broad issue of parity. And then there's another issue out there that is perhaps the great moral issue of our time that must be addressed and must be addressed now. It's a crisis precipitated by Donald Trump in September, and that is what is happening to our young people on the DACA program. We have 800,000 young people in this country, people who have lived virtually their entire lives in the United States of America, people who know no other country except the United States of America. This is their country. Trump in September rescinded the executive order on DACA that Obama established. And now many of these young people are living in incredible anxiety, wondering whether or not they're going to be subjected to deportation. That is just unacceptable. It is unspeakable. And we have got to pass a strong Dreamers Act and provide a path towards citizenship for these young people. Now, this is not just something that Bernie Sanders believes in. poll after poll after poll suggests that 70, 75, 80% of the American people understand that it would be a moral outrage to end the DACA program and to subject these young people to deportation. So we've got to stand up and fight for these young people, and I intend to do that. The last major issue that has to be dealt with now is to provide strong and equitable disaster relief for those states that were impacted so heavily months ago by the terrible hurricanes that we saw, and that is Texas, Florida, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands. And the point here is we need some serious analysis of the damage done and the cost it will require, the kinds of money it will need to rebuild these communities. The only point that I would make now is that unlike Texas and Florida, the people of Puerto Rico and the people of the Virgin Islands do not have any members of the United States Senate fighting for them. They don't have full voting members of the House of Representatives. So we have the moral responsibility to make sure that these territories get a fair shake and they are treated with the same respect and dignity as any state would be treated in the midst of a disaster. So those are the broad issues that we are dealing with right now. And it is imperative, I think, that the American people become involved in this debate, demand that any budget agreement starts addressing the crises facing the working people of this country. Any budget agreement contains a Dreamers Act protecting 800,000 young people and providing them with a path toward citizenship, and any agreement provides disaster relief for Texas, Florida, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands.